You know what you're going to get with a football game? Not the American football, but normal football. You're going to get 11 players kicking a ball around and trying to score a goal. And for the most part, that's true. But sometimes it's not true. Sometimes it's a little bit stranger than that. And those are the games I'm going to have a look at today. Well, some of them anyway. There's many more weird ones, which we'll get to at another time. But for now, have a look at these football oddities. Go on. The Game Boy Advance was their home to a who's who of the greatest platform heroes of all time. Seriously, what other format in the early 2000s could boast bounding superstars from Manic Miner, Samus Aran, the Belmont family, Donkey Kong, Rayman, Mega Man, Kirby, Crash Bandicoot, Klonoa, Spyro, Banjo and Kazooie, and of course the Twin Towers, the very first time both of them had released a platform game on the same format, Sonic and Mario. The answer to that is the Game Boy Advance. And it's always important to have the right answers. Just ask any heart surgeon. If they don't have the right answers, you're dead. But never mind the fat plumber or the spiny blue bonfire nester. No, there was no better or more famous platform star on the whole of the Game Boy Advance than David Beckham. Wait, what? Yes, indeed, David Robert Joseph Beckham, retired professional footballer, ex-captain of the England team, formerly of Preston North End, Manchester United, Real Madrid, LA Galaxy, AC Milan and Paris Saint-Germain, husband of a Spice Girl, style icon, much-loved international ambassador, president of the ridiculously named Inter Miami, and potential ex-lover to a woman in Rebecca Lewis who wanked off a pig on telly. Beckham was, from the moment he netted a goal from the halfway line against Wimbledon in 1996, an absolute superstar of the game, at a time when the sport was awash with top-tier talent like Zidane, Figo, Ronaldo, Roberto Carlos, Ronaldinho, Bergkamp and Valderrama. Was he as good as those players? Well, no. He wasn't particularly swift, he wasn't great at dribbling or tackling, and he never scored a lot of goals in any of the seasons he played. But Beckham was no slouch either, having an incredible passing range, the best cross in world football, a deadly free kick, a commitment to the game, and the steely determination that saw him influence the results of as many games as his more illustrious world-class colleagues and counterparts. I'd like you to have a look at that game against Greece in 2001 and tell me that that wasn't an incredible moment. Plus, he looked proper dreamy, didn't he? With all his silly haircuts ranging from 90s boy band all the way to handsome East End dad. David Beckham was a sexy man, lusted after by blossoming schoolgirls, bored housewives, men who prefer their bananas pink and as rigid as a femur, and why, he could even make a granny moist in a place that she thought long arid. Beckham was the tabloid darling of the time and had a real love-hate relationship with them. He supplanted former generation legend Paul Gascoigne, and he was succeeded by Wayne Rooney. I think we can all agree that Beckham was the looker of that bunch. He came along at the real dawn of celebrity culture that still exists with us today, and he used it to merchandise and market himself in all manner of ways, to the point where they even called it Brand Beckham. And at the peak of his powers as both a footballer and a multimedia darling, it made sense that a software house would like their name attached to that Beckham brand. Sports stars often had licensed games after all, and even though the pair of FIFA and Pro Evolution Soccer franchises from EA and Konami had a complete stranglehold in the PS2 and Xbox era, it was still a time unlike now when a different soccer title could make a decent amount of cash should it be marketed correctly. And who better than the one-man marketing machine that was David Beckham to have such a game named after him. It was Liverpool-based software house Rage that wanted to ride Beckham's sarong strings to glory. And as a successful development team that had expanded and recently become a publisher themselves, what better way to make an impact than to acquire the rights to one of the most famous sportsmen in the entire world? It was also a great fit for Rage 2. Their first developed games were the Striker series, which would get numerous sequels from their beginnings on the Amiga through the 16-bit era of consoles to the PlayStation and Dreamcast. EA also gave them the coding job for FIFA 97 on the aging Super Nintendo, and Microsoft allowed them to code Microsoft International Football 2000 for the PC. They knew their way around a football pitch, which is pretty easy to be honest, isn't it? It's flats. There's a goal that end, there's a goal that end, there's some corner flags over there. I think we all know our way around a football pitch. Coming just after that Greece goal and on the cusp of a tournament that England were among the favourites to win in Japan, with DB7 debuting as captain, Rage were surely going to clean up, weren't they? What could possibly go wrong? In short, the game. Released in 2002 on the Xbox, the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2, with those versions programmed by Rage themselves, and the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance coded externally by Majesco and Yo-Yo Entertainment. Well, they weren't awful football games, they just weren't as good as Pro Evolution Soccer or FIFA, in a similar manner to how the Striker games weren't as good as Sensible Soccer or ISS. Always the footballing bridesmaids, never the footballing brides were Rage. A Metacritic score of 65 out of 100 saw David Beckham's soccer underperform in its sales, which, if not the final nail in Rage's very brief 3-year stint as a publisher, certainly didn't do them much good. Neither did their other big license, the Rocky series, that came out the following year. The Game Boy version of David Beckham Soccer, though, wasn't even average at all. It was just rubbish. IGN gave it a 2.2 out of 10, criticising its lack of AI and simplistic control, and said it provides no fun. So that seemed to end David Beckham and his role as a cover star of his own video game. He would just have to join the crowds in the FIFA or Pro Evolution Soccer games, I guess. Or did it? Not quite. You see, there was another game to come. In 2001, Scottish games developer Denki had made a charming little puzzle game for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance called Denki Blocks. Hey, wait a minute, that's the name of their company. It gained good reviews in the 8 and 9 areas of the scale, with praise for its challenge and crisp, bright colours. The game would later appear on iOS, PSP, and even as a game on Sky Television. Did you know there were games on Sky Television? I didn't have Sky growing up. I had to eat out of bins while watching ITV. Denki's next game would be this curious bloody thing, a platformer starring England's biggest post-millennium football superstar. And so without further Freddie ado, you see what I did there? Let's go and have a look at this. Go Beckham adventure on Soccer Island sees the titular star removed from Manchester's grey skies and perpetual rain to the meteorologically varied shores of Soccer Island. Soccer Island is a footballing-obsessed archipelago that has become beset by one evil Mr. Woe, an absolute turd of a man. And he's gone and turned all the land's beautiful animals into monsters. Monsters who all have a football-themed name, naturally. Beckham's only friend in this peculiar mission to save the island from destruction is a coach with a passing resemblance to an ageing version of Mario. Well, ish. He's short, he's fat, he's a moustache and a hat. I think I've just made a chant up about Mario. And anyway, that's Mario enough for me, and it helps set up the next part of the video. God, Can't you see I'm trying to set the next bit up? See, the coach is not the only thing that looks like Mario. The island itself resembles SNES classic Yoshi's Island. The little map he moves around looks an awful lot like the one from Mario World 2. In terms of inspiration, there's a lot of worse places you can draw for your platform game. And much like the man himself, it's a looker too. The thick lined graphics are crisp, they're chunky and they're gaily coloured, and the landscapes, well, they look absolutely incredible on the Game Boy Advance. It's a wonderfully realised look that should definitely be in the conversation for one of the platform's best looking titles. It's easily the best European 2D platformer that I've ever looked at with my two irises. I'm sorry about that, hello cartoon fun. We'll have a conversation about it later. Gameplay consists of you as the chibi version of Beckham, running, jumping, dribbling and using your football skills to collect items, destroy blocks and defeat enemies in a variety of different ways. The enemies have different weak points and you have to deal with them in a different manner, all of which include hoofing a ball at a part of their body. Now, this isn't an original idea at all. Soccer Kid had you as a football kicking platform star, as did the Super Nintendo adaptation of forgotten 90s cartoon The Hurricanes. Not to mention Marco's Magic Football. With that said, Go Go Beckham Adventure on Soccer Island does that concept by far the best, with crisper controls, better game design all round and a level of puzzling challenge that is both fair and enjoyable. As you progress through the game, you unlock bonus skills that enhance your abilities, such as the ability to recall the ball back to your foot and the ability to steer the ball with greater bend. There are a variety of other balls you can pick up, such as the one made out of steel and the beach ball that bounces around like crazy. There are 40 levels set across 5 zones, and perhaps in one of the game's biggest failings, they don't really alter in look beyond a shift in the colour palette and the increased use of different topological features such as a mountain or water traps, which become more frequent as you go through the game. It should be noted here that David Beckham apparently cannot drown, which, should marital relations ever fail with Victoria and she feels like bumping him off for that life insurance, is something she should perhaps be wise to bear in mind. Murder him in a different manner, Victoria Beckham. The actual level design, though, in terms of its gameplay, it's solid enough, as good as some of the creme de la creme of the 16-bit era platformers like Robocod, say, if not quite as creative as a Mario World. You can go back to completed levels at any time, which you may want to do, as they feature bonuses that you may have missed in a previous playthrough, including a series of balls that spell his name should you hoof them through the hoop that represents the game's literal goal. Don't worry, you don't have to be Beckham and struggle to spell your own name. There's a letter per level in each of these stages. It's something that you may or may not choose to go back to. If you're a completionist, it will make the game's challenge a lot harder. It's up to you, really. Bosses, which are cast as managers, all offer unique challenges at the end of the level, but they, like the rest of the game, really shouldn't prove to be overly difficult. It's not a frustratingly tricky game at all, as it was marketed to younger players, and will perhaps, if you don't go back and collect all the items in the game, provide a few hours of gameplay, but I can only assure you they will be hours well spent. Go Go Beckham has absolutely no right to be as engaging or pretty as it is, coming so soon after the disappointing proper football efforts in the Rage series. It ends up being one of the very, very best platform games on the system that didn't derive from their system originally. I'm talking about all those Super Nintendo ports. Reviews were positive, with Eurogamer saying that even if you hate football and Beckham, it's still worth slipping into his boots, and they gave it an 8 out of 10. IGN, while not as into you, still gave it a 7 out of 10, and they said that it's not a first-class title, but it still beats out the vast majority of the third-party Game Boy Advance platformers. I've got to say personally that as a surprise, it's certainly more the free kick against Greece than that surprise that the pig got when it went to work with Rebecca Lewis on that Channel 5 show. Like, subscribe. Okay, thanks, bye. Football. It's been ruined by money, hasn't it? That Super League idea, just bloody greed. Paris Saint-Germain, well, they've hoarded the world's best strikers. The difference between the haves and the have-nots in the Premier League is now as glaring a void as Ton 618, the black hole the size of 14 solar systems. Even in games, football is designed to rinse your wallet of every spare coin in your purse. FIFA's Ultimate Team is a yearly abuse of your pocket, with EA's hands dipping repeatedly into it as rapidly as a teenage boy's hands would disappear into his pants in front of his first night's encounter with Pornhub. Electronic Arts have been doing it since consoles have been plugged into phone lines. But there was a soccer game, fairly unknown even to this day, that was doing it even when FIFA was a baby in its isometric pants, nestled into its Mega Drive console slot crib. In your local arcade, amongst a lot of other machines intent on mugging you for your hard-earned 10p pieces, the truly blatant Fagin in the group was clad in a football shirt. And that Fagin was Super Cup Finals. Super Cup Finals, released in 1993, was a sequel to Taito's Football Champ, itself a hyperactive arcade soccer classic with little regard for the rules, anime soccer stars and jazzed up post-goal razzmatazz. Is that the first time I've used razzmatazz in a video? Yes, I think it is. Football Champ was followed by minorly jazzed up sequels like Euro Football Champ and Hat-Trick Hero, and eventually, 3 years later, we got Super Cup Finals. Super Cup Finals is, as Jimmy Greaves would say, a funny old game. After selecting your anime captain with wild, colourful hair, and sometimes with a cool name like H-Edge, it's on to the gaily coloured stadium and its bright pitch. What other football game features both England and Great Britain? That feels like cheating, guys. And there's also a selectable pirate evil boss team that you can select from the start called the Max team. If you select them, you don't have to play them after you've won the World Cup. So I did it. This game is already inspiring cheating. The shambolic, cheeky referee can't keep up with the action, which means provided he isn't on screen, you can get away with all sorts of nefarious wrongery. Knee an opponent in the face, punch him in the chops, rugby tackle him, flying knee him in the back, or if you so wish, pull down his bloomin' pants. The worst you'll get is a yellow card. Not only is the combat very reminiscent of the classic kung football movie Shaolin Soccer, but a lot of the moves are too. The footballers flip and spin balletically around the pitch like Cirque du Soleil performers, and occasionally you'll perform a super kick provided you hit a few parameters, which will shoot a near unstoppable shot at the keeper. The super kick comes up a bit more regularly than it did in Football Champ, which limited the super kick to a once in a blue moon occasion. Let me just tell you, it was very rare to see the super kick in that game. You had to perform it in the dying seconds of the game when you're behind with only your captain and on a certain part of the pitch that depended on whatever the hero's position you selected at the beginning of the game was. So if you were a number 8, you could only score it from a certain point on the pitch. If you were a number 9, you could score it a bit further on. It was very rare, and when it happened, it's bloody wild. In Super Cup Finals, you get a selectable menu that pops up whenever there's a throw-in, a free kick, and when the keeper has hold of the ball. You can use points in exchange for a variety of super special moves, all priced up according to, how useful they are, I reckon. A super effective slide tackle, a timed super dash, and a largely useless function that makes your teammates form around you like they're the bloody red arrows, are the lowest point rewards. A range of different shots are the highest point rewards, such as the banana, which I actually failed to pull off no matter how many times I tried to do it, an easily accessible super shot, and then there's the Mac Daddy, the hyper shot. Not just near unstoppable, absolutely unstoppable. From any part of the pitch, it turns the player and the ball into a blue fireball-like shot from the wrists of Ryu, and it powers down through the other side of the pitch into the goalkeeper's chest, taking him through the goal, crushing the poor custodian's ribs as he smashes his back into the stadium, ripping his shirt to shreds, and then leaving him lying through the tattered goal in a broken clump in front of the 6-yard box. Hit this move and you've got yourself an absolutely guaranteed goal. It costs a whole 6 points though. But how do you get these points? I haven't explained that. Well, money. Real human money. Exchange your credits for super move points. Yes, you can do that. You can carry on playing your game. You can select to do penalties if you lose a game, or select to play the game again, or you could just keep buying different moves and going through the game like that. You can keep buying the hyper shot and then you can't lose. This obviously takes more credits. How cynical is that? You're stealing children's money, Taito. I say that as I play this game that I've got surrounded by about another 1,000 other stolen games on my hard drive. But, you know, I'm a hypocrite and I accept that. So yeah, football has always been ruined by money, and it's a shame that this game took this dead-hearted approach. Along with Football Champ, it's among the very best arcade football games, along with the likes of Neo Geo Cup and Super Sidekicks. It's a spectacular, silly, incredible soccer game with the wicked soul of a FIFA Supremo awarding a World Cup to a desert with stadiums built by slaves. Super Cup finals then. The game's gone, mate. The game's gone. FIFA, or Michelle as she's known to her mates of the film world, is truly one of the powerhouse franchises of all time. Now we're approaching the launch of the last instalment in the FIFA franchise. And it's not through a lack of success, but because Electronic Arts and FIFA themselves have finally reached the zenith of greedy capitalist machinations and have sulked their way home alone to their gilded mansions. Yes, the money-loving affair has come to an end, with both parties taking their Giuliani ball home. FIFA Road to World Cup 98 was without question the peak of the PS1 era set of games, and indeed is seen by many as the best of the entire long lineage of Carlos kickaballery. Kotaku, in a 2021 article, even declared it as the very best sports game of all time. Strong words indeed, in a world where many a connoisseur of football games would argue that one of the sensible soccers, or one of the Pro Evolution soccers, are better than any of Electronic Arts' soccer instalments. With that said, FIFA Road to World Cup 98 is a superlative effort by anyone's standards of the era. Its two predecessors were butt ugly harridans, with easy goal scoring and clunky gameplay. FIFA Road to the World Cup 98 had a sparkly new engine, unprecedented customization, the utterly pointless but fun indoor soccer mode, and the most amount of teams to date. Do you want to play through a Malaysian League campaign? Of course not, but you could. Go Sarawak. It also had an incredible amount of FIFA recognised international teams. Sorry, Vatican City, you're not one of those. Go back to the priesthood, footballer. You can use any of these international teams to try and qualify for the World Cup from the very start of the qualification process. Now, the qualification process these days is something that most football fans seem to hate. It interrupts their Premier League scheduling, so they'd rather watch Brentford versus Fulham than, say, I don't know, Slovenia versus Slovakia. I can appreciate that. But yes, you can play as any of the teams from the powerhouses from Europe and South America, along with every team from those forgettable Oceania and Caribbean islands. You get to play as St Kitts and Nevis. That's 2 for 1. All of the teams from the 32-bit versions feature in the 16-bit versions as well. Yes, incredibly, there were 16-bit versions of FIFA Road to World Cup, even though the formats were nearing their death. They were indeed some of the last released for the consoles. So low priority were these titles for Electronic Arts that they were released exclusively in European territories, and programming duties were shipped out away from Electronic Arts Canada, who handled the Saturn, the N64, the Windows and PlayStation 1 versions. The 16-bit versions were joint efforts by Electronic Arts Extended Play Productions, which featured programmers from the very first FIFA International Soccer, and XYZ Productions, who did this and the 16-bit versions of FIFA 97 and nothing else ever. There was also a Game Boy version, but that's such a dirty little stepchild that EA disowned it completely. They allowed Tiertex to develop it and THQ to publish it. The Game Boy version lost most of the teams, and everything looks like it's a ghost version of soccer played in the afterlife. It probably shouldn't be mentioned in this video, so maybe I'll cut this out. If it's still in, well, you can blame me for wasting even more of your time. Playing the 16-bit versions, or at least having a look at the stat screens, reveals something quite unusual. Most of the stats for the big international teams seem pretty accurate. Current world champions Brazil, who won the trophy in 1994, Euro 96 winners Germany, soon-to-be champs France, and Le Tournoi 97 champions England. Yes, England genuinely won a trophy against world-class opposition in the 1990s. They're all good. They're all good teams. Most of the minnows, like San Marino and Vanuatu, they're suitably dire. But some stats seem, well, a little bit too high. Let's have a look at Europe first. Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Estonia, Macedonia, Malta. I'm only halfway here through the European teams, but these all seem very, very high in their statistics. They're not tremendous teams now. Yes, Macedonia and Albania have qualified for tournaments in the last 10 years or so, but they're not world beaters. Back when this game released, though, they really weren't as good as these stats suggest. If you want proof of this, let's have a look at the FIFA rankings from the era. Now, if you don't know what the FIFA rankings are, well, the FIFA rankings are the flawed but ultimately reasonably fair estimation of each country's current standing in world football. These stats are from the same month that the game was published, which was November 1997. In the FIFA World Rankings, Albania are 117th, Armenia are 168th, Azerbaijan are 124th, Estonia 103rd, Georgia 72nd, and Macedonia 86th. Going by the FIFA rankings, these teams should not have stats this high in this game. Some things are not right here. But that's just Europe, and Europe is the home to probably 80% of the world-class international football sides. Heading over to the other powerhouse of world football, to South America now, home of serial champions like Brazil, Uruguay and Argentina. And there's nothing too amiss here. There's not many teams in this federation. Chile, led by the then fearsome pair of Ivan Zamorano and Marcelo Salas, they seem a little bit weak. As do Peru, whereas Paraguay seem maybe a bit too strong. As do Venezuela. At least Paraguay, captained then by legendary goal-scoring keeper and rampant egoist Jose Luis Chilavert, at least they qualified for the '98 World Cup, unlike Venezuela. Africa has a few teams missing, though you'd only really care if you were a hardcore Chad fan. But once again, there are anomalies here in this region. Even the biggest Lamana Trésor Loire fan wouldn't rate the Democratic Republic of Congo as a perfect football team, and he hadn't even played for them yet. Similarly, Mozambique, 151st in the 97 FIFA World Rankings, that's out of 192, probably didn't deserve this statistical glow-up. North America finds Barbados 114th in and the Cayman Islands 164th in real life as perfect teams, better than their actual leaders of quality in the area, those being the United States and Mexico. They're not the only ones to have inflated stats in this area. Other tiny island minnows like Dominican Republic, the Netherlands Antilles and Haiti seem a touch inflated too. Moving over to Asia, and we have the tiny desert island of Bahrain as potential World Cup winners according to these stats. Along with fellow international behemoths like Kuwait, Lebanon, Iraq, our next World Cup hosts Qatar, the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, Tajikistan, the United Arab Emirates, the Yemen and Vietnam, overshadowing the continent's true quality teams like Saudi Arabia, Japan, Iran and South Korea. Weird. Finally, we have the true acid test for this, that being Oceania, a federation so piss-poor weak that its best team, the decidedly average Australia, left to go and play in Asia, so they would get at least a modicum of actual competition after getting silly results like 31-0 against American Samoa in 2002. American Samoa must have handed in a sick note as they're not present. Maybe they even forgot their kit. However, teams like New Zealand are in this and are handed dead poor stats despite being the second best team in that division at the time. They're still not very good, but they are a damn sight better than the Solomon Islands, Western Samoa, and especially the Cook Islands, who in real life did not have anything like the players required for these statistics in this game. I mean, they were the second worst team in the FIFA rankings of 1997, 191st out of 192 teams. Do these bogus statistics affect club teams too? A little bit, yes. Looking at the Premier League table of 1997 and 1998, the one in real life, you might be surprised to see that Barnsley are so strong when compared to Sam Allardyce's Bolton. But there's nothing quite as egregious as the statistics of the international teams. So do these statistical anomalies affect the N64 and PlayStation 1 versions, seeing as they were handled by a different team at EA Canada? There are a few anomalies that I'd question, yes. I wouldn't say that Newcastle were a better team than Man United in 1997 and 98, but there's nothing quite as standout strange as the Cook Islands being as good as Brazil. It does appear to be an issue restricted entirely to the 16-bit efforts, in my opinion, these poor little late-stage afterthoughts. It was at this point I decided I was going to try a little experiment. Well, I say a little experiment, it was quite the grand experiment. I was going to do a World Cup. No, 4 World Cups, one on each of the PlayStation 1, N64, Super Nintendo and Mega Drive versions. Exactly the same teams in exactly the same rounds, but just to see if the results bore out how good the stats were for these teams. The way I was going to do this was that I would take the 16 best teams on the November 1997 FIFA rankings and put them against the 16 most overrated teams in the 16-bit versions of FIFA. I put a fair amount of effort into it. I did a spinny wheel thing to determine the groups, and I was really looking forward to an anomaly like Aruba playing France in a semi-final, or the World Cup closer being contested by the Cayman Islands and Bahrain. The plan was to set up the matches and let the computer play itself and decide who would win, with no interaction from me at all. I wanted it to be a pure experiment. But then I realised a couple of things. This version of FIFA didn't let you play out a simulated World Cup finals, as in the last 32 teams. So I'd have to sit there and painstakingly watch the computer play out 64 friendly matches while making notes, 4 times over. That would be 256 matches. No, I'm not going to watch an old computer game play itself 256 times. And then I realised that I could just let it play a couple of games on each format to see if the experiment would even work. Each time on the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive, the traditional superpowers would trounce their counterparts even if the minnows had better stats than the teams that they were playing against. There was a 5-0 to England against Mozambique, a 3-0 tonking of Iraq by Russia, a 6-1 in a tussle twixt Brazil and the fabled and fearsome Cook Islands. So at half-time on the games, I started to look at the player stats, and the likes of Ronaldo and Shearer et al. Would be high. They would be in the 90s, as they are in real life. I don't know if they have stats in real life, but they are pretty good players. Whereas the stats on the minnows, they were poor. I mean, this poor bugger playing for Mozambique with his very lowly stats here, he's on such a low wage when compared to those prima donnas in the Premiership that he can't even afford a surname. Poor old F. Bloody Steve McManaman, can't you lend him one of the man sections of your name, you bloody rich fop? There didn't seem a lot of point then in playing a World Cup at this point, let alone 4 of them. So what was going on with these statistical graphs? I don't bloody know. I trawled the net looking for articles about the 16-bit versions of FIFA Road to the World Cup, but there's so little interest in these European-only half-assed efforts, released right as Sega and Nintendo were going to take their respective early 90s consoles for their final car ride to the vets as they lay whimpering in the back seat. And you know what? I didn't find anything at all about it. It literally looks, and I'm just guessing here, like they rushed it out of the door with whatever stats they had left in the stat bucket at 4:55 on a Friday afternoon. So, yeah, I've got nothing to say about it now. Were you expecting a great revelation? Me too. Were you expecting a hilarious video with the captain of Tajikistan lofting the greatest prize in world sport on the Mega Drive? Me too. But the crushing reality is this. As an England fan, I've come used to disappointment after a lot of hype. And after doing all this stat gathering and sitting through the computer playing multiple games of FIFA, I sure as hell wasn't going to not put this video out. Because yes, as I said, I'm an England fan. I remember Gaza missing the ball by millimetres in that epic Euro 96 semi-final. The disallowed Sol Campbell goal in 1998. That gaff by Seaman against Brazil in 2002 when they were down to 10 men. The constant penalty heartaches throughout most of the 2000s and even latterly of the 2010s and 20s. That Lampard goal in 2010 against Germany that probably wouldn't have mattered anyway. Or even the daring to hope that I felt when Trippier scored in the semi-final in 2018 against Croatia and Luke Shaw netted in that fateful night at Wembley in 2021. All ended in crushing disappointment. It is a feeling of emptiness, of excitement to then nothing. But it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And today, what have we learned? We've learned that I've whittled on about a bunch of meaningless stats in a pair of afterthought versions of a yearly sports franchise. So maybe the journey thing is a really poor analogy. Yeah, sorry. What a bummer to end this video on. Well, it was a bummer of a video, wasn't it? Sorry again. If you're watching this when this uploads, we don't yet know the champions of the soccer world. If you're watching this after the 2022 World Cup, you will have that knowledge of the future, like a wise cyborg sage. One thing's for sure though, they are hollow champions, fake victors, faux winners. No, this is nothing to do with the shady nature of the Qatar World Cup and its corruptness and flat-out disregard of human rights. No, it's because you can't be champion until you've beaten the real world champs. That is the Hurricanes, because their championship spirit is here to stay. At least that's what the song says. The Hurricanes! Sounds very wheezy. The Hurricanes was produced by Dick... No, stop laughing, you're better than this. Dick Entertainment, and was a half-hourly show comprising of 65 animated episodes that ran from 1993 to 1997. When I say they ran from 1993 to 1997, I don't mean like constantly. The Hurricanes channel would be a mad flex though. It was part made by Scottish Television Enterprises and became syndicated in the States, but shown on ITV in the UK. It tells the story of a recently orphaned heiress of a football team called Amanda Carey, and follows her efforts as she seeks to make the Hurricanes become champions of world soccer by beating famous clubs from around the world. None of them are real clubs though, unless Standish Park Rangers had secretly been dominating the Premier League throughout the 1990s. Amanda and her head coach Jock Stone, based on Celtic FC's Jock Stein, have assembled an international squad of their own, with broad stereotypes making up the roster, all with one main personality trait, because 90s cartoons are always going to be putting minimum effort into their scripts. Do you want to know how 1990s this is? Their enemies, the Garco's Gorgons, play in a volcano. Yes, that wouldn't pass health and safety muster these days, would it? US Gold acquired the license and released 3 games on 3 formats, which, while they look quite similar, are actually 3 different games. The premise is largely the same. You have to kick a soccer ball at wildlife until they die. Arc Developments handled the Sega versions on the Game Gear and the Mega Drive, while the Super Nintendo version was developed by our old chums at Probe. All 3 were definite Twilight titles on their respective formats, coming out in late 1994. I'm afraid my usual format of putting reviews of the games at the end of the episode has been stopped in its tracks like a scything tackle from Virgil van Dijk. Put simply, there weren't any reviews in the major publications of this game when it came out. I think possibly because the Hurricanes cartoon wasn't a huge hit in the States, and so they never even released the Sega versions of it anywhere other than Europe. And the Super Nintendo version, while that did get released, wasn't a huge seller over there either, because it's about proper football, isn't it? It's a shame that the Americans didn't get to experience the Sega versions of it, as they are a little bit superior, in my opinion, to the programmed Super Nintendo version. But more on that in a minute. They're ostensibly all very similar games with the same plot. The Garco's Gorgons, those dudes who hang around playing football in a volcano like a bunch of wolly-chopped buffoons have challenged our heroic Hurricanes to a friendly charity match to see who is the best in the world. Only they've nobbled the Hurricanes' method of transport, so they can't get to that volcano very easily. The Gorgons' plans is that the Hurricanes won't be able to turn up, so they'll look like both cowdy custards and a bunch of people that hate children with like ingrowing hands or whatever charity is being supported. What awful PR that would be for the Hurricanes. So instead of taking the team coach, the players will walk across various continents so that they can play this football match and save face and prove that they are indeed the best soccer team in the world. And they'll do it while dressed in full kit like a bunch of full kit wankers. And yes, as I previously mentioned, they will be assaulting wildlife by kicking footballs at them. Gee, I sure hope that charity match wasn't for abused monkeys. So yes, fans of Soccer Kid and Marco's Magic Football will find a familiar theme here. It is a soccer-based platformer. But let's not forget to mention also those who are aware of the underrated platform puzzler Go-Go Beckham Adventure on Soccer Island on the Game Boy Advance, a game I have covered. Go check that out at that link, but wait until you've watched this video. So yes, you're an athlete, and by cracky you're going to use your soccer ball to protect yourself from soccer-hating creatures, fauna and thugs, or you'll die trying. I would say personally that the Hurricanes game is better than Soccer Kid or Marco's Magic Football, but maybe your opinion differs. It's certainly not better than Go-Go Beckham though. Controlling your football as a weapon changes dependent on the version you're playing. But the Sega version's simplified button scheme see it take an early lead over its Super Nintendo equivalent. The SNES makes full use of its extra buttons, but I'm not sure it should have done. Sometimes its button scheme gets a bit confusing in the heat of the moment. The Game Gear and Mega Drive versions have you press up and down along with the shoot button to choose the height of your kick, and it's far more intuitive. The Sega version also has less slippery inertia on its Pro tags, and it's a fair amount easier to control your footballer on those tiny little platforms than its programmed stablemate. With that said, all three versions struggle with the game's main issue, the very vertically large levels, giving you a fair amount of freedom to get from A to B, which is a good thing, but a bad thing about it is that you sometimes have to do massive, huge, enormous blind jumps into the abyss, and you might well end up on a spike, or even worse, in a big hole and lose one of your very limited lives. The game is a tough challenge already. It could have done without this. The Super Nintendo version is not quite as visually interesting as the Sega versions either, lacking the level of variety and stages of its Sega brothers. The Mega Drive version really has a very clear connection to the source material cartoon itself, with cutscenes of non-playable characters, and also has a larger roster to select from. The SNES version has just two, Cal Casey and Napper Thompson, whereas the Mega Drive version has 4 players to choose from. And yes, in all versions the characters play exactly the same, but it's nice to have the choice. Given that these games came out at a similar time, it looks more like Probe rushed its homework than Arc Developments did. Oh, and if you're wondering how many characters are in the Game Gear one, it's just one, but God bless it, it's only little. Give it a break. The Hurricanes in all 3 versions is perhaps a little bit too European platformer for my taste. Indeed, the Game Gear version won't let you finish its levels until you've collected enough stuff. A very typically Euro platformer stance to take. But it's not a terrible Euro platformer. In fact, it's pretty good fun, and even though the Super Nintendo one isn't on a par with the Mega Drive and Game Gear versions, it's still a solid 6 out of 10. It's never going to supplant your Mario, your Sonic, your Donkey Kong or your Rise Star cartridges in the console slot, but it's a fun little platformer all the same. You'll probably be playing it for about as long as Saudi Arabia are playing football in the 2022 World Cup, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say is about 4.5 hours. So yes, please give the Hurricanes a go. It was that goal that broke hearts from Tyneside to Truro. It was a shot that caused fury in Folkestone, anger in Anglesey, rage in Radcliffe, seething in Scunthorpe, vexation in Vauxhall, and yes, glee in Glasgow. No man was more annoyed than one Peter Leslie Shilton about the hand of God. And this is his game. Also, you know what? Us English folk tend to forget that one of the very best goals of all time, and certainly of the World Cup, was scored in that very game. Look at this.
Arranca por la derecha el genio del fútbol mundial y es el tercero a tocar para Borruchaga siempre Maradona. Genio, genio, genio,
Coy sounded very pleased, didn't he? But what a talent Maradona was. Peter Shilton, though, he wasn't a fan. He's still quite bitter about it all. It's a shame because although the World Cup is the pinnacle of any player's career, Shilton was an incredible player in his own right. It's easy to forget. He's got a hell of a lot of achievements of his own. Despite retiring over 30 years ago from international football, Peter has remained the most capped England player, with his career lasting from 1970 to 1990. His club career was an even more enduring run. It started out in England's Year of Glory 1966, and it lasted until they won their last international trophy, La Tournoi, in 1997. What an incredible run that is. That journey took him from Leicester City to Leyton Orient, with stops at the likes of Stoke City, Southampton, Derby County, Plymouth Argyle, and his most successful stint, which was at Nottingham Forest. He is the all-time record holder of the most competitive appearances in world football, with 1,390. He has the League Cup, 2 European Cups, the English League Trophy, and the European Super Club Cup under his belt. Not literally, that would be uncomfortable. The man also has the 1978 PFA Players Player of the Year, an award very hard to win by a goalkeeper, and the IOC European Footballer of the Season award for 1979 to 1980 to his name as well. Peter Shilton was an incredible player. But it was this one moment that seemed to have defined his entire career, not just with football fans, but the man himself. He constantly made bitter tweets about Diego in the intervening years, and though he wrote a respectful piece after the Argentine great's tragic death in 2020, he once again reverted to curmudgeon status when questioned about the £7.1 million auction of the match-worn number 10 shirt from that game in 2022. Cheer up, love. He's gone now. The same year as that historic Mexico 1986 match, Argus Software Developments released their officially licensed soccer title, Peter Shilton's Handball Maradona, which I should point out was a licensed game of Peter Shilton rather than Diego. I mean, if it was Diego's game, it would be called Best Player in the World Maradona, or I won the World Cup at Mexico 86 Maradona, or the other goal I scored was super good actually, so quit whining you curly-haired English twat Maradona. Another big reason is that Diego Maradona, given his diminutive size, would probably have been a terrible goalkeeper. And as this game is a game where you play exclusively as a goalkeeper, it would not be a good fit for him. As far as I can tell, this is certainly the first and possibly the only console or computer commercially released soccer title where you can only play as the fella between the sticks. Other keepers have had games, Tony Meola and Peter Schmeichel to name but two, but they were an arcade and a management game respectively. And what's wrong with Peter Schmeichel's face here? I'm aware that there are options to play as a keeper in modern games like FIFA and Pro Evo, or eFootball, or whatever they've done to my poor baby now. But these are small modes in the main game itself, unused features for the most part. I mean, who would want to play as a goalkeeper? A striker misses 8 shots and scores 1, and he's the hero of the match. A goalkeeper doing the same but with saves, and, well, he's on the bench and probably on the transfer list. So in terms of the game, no matter the quality of it, at least it deserves a place in history as being quite unique. It's got that much at least. Call me a tin foil hat wearer if you like, but suspiciously, on all three versions, those being the Amstrad, the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum, well, they all have the same name, Peter Shilton's Football, rather than Peter Shilton's Handball Maradona, as the name on the title screen. This makes me wonder if the game underwent a name change late in production, with an alteration to the loading screen and packaging later on, in an effort to capitalise on that year's biggest football incident. Moreover, I wonder what Shilton thought of the name. I can't see any evidence online that indicates that there was a name change, so who knows? Also, the title would seem to indicate you'll be participating in an international event like the World Cup, given that Maradona is mentioned, but you'll actually not be playing international matches at all, but selecting from a list of English football clubs for your goal custodian efforts. To modern footballing eyes, it's a curious mixture of teams indeed. Certainly a surprise to, say, a youngster to see Crewe Alexandra or Luton Town there. And while it shouldn't be a surprise that some of the biggest teams in the Premier League of today aren't featured, teams like Newcastle or West Ham, it is slightly puzzling that Arsenal and Everton aren't here. Everton were truly one of the best teams in the country in the 1980s after all. The game modes are thus: you can practice, you can attempt to increase your seemingly arbitrary stats by saving multiple shots in a row, or you can play the main game, which just seems to be a friendly against another one of the clubs. There's no competition or tournament to win. There's no storyline to play through where you play as an aspiring keeper attempting to get better. No, it's just a match and that's it. The game ends. Even a Tiger Electronics game would have stages. Come on, Argus, you could do better than this. So I suppose you could say that the skill upgrade sessions are the closest we're going to get to a multi-level part of the game, but in effect, they don't actually mean anything. You don't use them in a main game because there is no main game. In terms of gameplay, well, you control your little keeper as he faces a series of different keeper worrying scenarios. Open play attempts, long range efforts, corners, free kicks are all things you'll have to face. And just know this, your defences are far more likely to be playing more like the Harry Maguire of 2022 than they are to be playing like the Harry Maguire of 2018, if they turn up at all. You can't do this job at home, lads. Come on, get on the pitch. Your little keeper controls smoothly enough and the fire button will make him dive in the correct direction. And, well, you should save the ball if you've got your timing and your positioning right. It's simple goalkeeping stuff. There's a touch of frustration that sometimes comes from the ball seemingly floating through your flailing goalkeeper, but that might actually be me and my poor depth perception than anything to do with the game having a bug in it. Try to keep the score down at your end and hopefully your team will score at the other side of the stadium and will score more than your team concedes. You will only get to witness the sequences where you're involved, however. Out of the three versions, it's the Commodore 64 one which is probably the best, featuring as it does colourful graphics and the odd speech sample. But saying that is sort of like calling it the best striker at Tunbridge Angels Football Club. See, the game itself isn't particularly good. Make no mistake, as an 8-bit soccer goalkeeper simulator, it does absolutely nothing wrong. It's just that the concept, as a game, is, well, very limited. It can't really do much more than it does with the concept. Well, except maybe some sort of league or goalkeeper career storyline. What it is, though, is a more limited version of that goalkeeper training minigame that you play while FIFA loads. And that training minigame, well, it's everybody's least favourite. Therein lies the problem with Peter Shilton's Handball Maradona. And maybe it's that knowledge, rather than Maradona's handball, that has made him into a bitter old man. Yeah, it's definitely the game from 1986 rather than the life-altering incident. For sure. That's 100% it. Your Sinclair in their issue 15 said that the gameplay isn't gripping enough to prevent their attention wandering, as they gave it a 5 out of 10. Issue 41 of Commodore User had a review requesting better controls and graphics, saying Peter Shilton's getting a free transfer with their 4 out of 10 review. Amstrad Action gave it a 38% in their issue 17. They decided that the horrible graphics, lack of variety and bad sound just wasn't for them. A bit of an own goal, they said. We all like to think we're smart, don't we? Some of us know how to design space rockets. Some of us know how to fix broken organs and limbs. Some of us can even program vast landscapes, worlds, even universes. And some of us know who won the FA Cup in 1997 and who they beat in the final. It was Chelsea and Middlesbrough, respectively. And I guess that makes me just as smart and important as those other types of people I mentioned. And finally, well, in 2001 at least, all that useless football knowledge finally came to use. Well, sort of use. But yay, a quiz game that concentrated on stuff I know rather than, I don't know, the currency of Belize or the name of the palace in Copenhagen. No general knowledge questions for me, thanks. I'll just have questions about Hertha Berlin or, I don't know, Albertini or something like that. And not questions like you found on that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game that I did the other month. But where does this licence come from? Well, Sky Sports launched in 1990 under the name of the Sports Channel on March the 27th. It was part of BSB, aka British Satellite Broadcasting. Sky had launched a rival sports channel the same year called Eurosport, but had pulled out of the deal with the European Broadcasting Union after a legal wrangling. In August of 1990, BSB and Sky merged and the sports channel became Sky Sports. Initially, it aired rugby and the Bundesliga from Germany and Serie A football from Italy. But then Sky had the smart idea of helping to nudge the seed of a greedy money-making idea into the minds of the chairman of the First Division clubs. I am, of course, talking about the Premier League. It was a breakaway from the FA football pyramid and featured the very best teams in the country. It's a bit like that dreadful European Super League idea they came up with a couple of years ago, but not a closed shop seen as a last desperate hurrah for the spend-happy likes of Barcelona and Juventus who want some of that Premier League gravy train. Sorry, guys. Mind you, people thought the Premier League was a bad idea at the time, and, well, maybe it is. But at least the Premier League hasn't stopped the likes of Barnsley or Blackpool joining the league just because kids in North America and Africa don't walk around wearing their kits. Anyway, Sky became synonymous with top-level English football for decades, with competitors like BT, Amazon and the like only now starting to make inroads into Sky's Premier League coverage. But for the time when this game came out, Sky was very much the millennium-era Manchester United in terms of televising football in 2001, unlike today where it's the Man United of 2020 of televised football, as in part of a group of contenders rather than just a standout, and not even the best one of those. And so we find Sky Sports Football Quiz, no doubt released in the wake of the success of the previously mentioned Who Wants to Be a Millionaire series. Unlike Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Sky Sports Football Quiz doesn't really have a base show to copy the atmosphere or format from. It's not really a TV show, is it, Sky Sports? It's a 24-hour sports and sports news channel. But it does take the look of that whole sports channel aesthetic. The whites, the reds, the general presentation are synonymous with the Sky Sports brand, and you couldn't really mistake that design for any other domestic sports channel or sports programme. It's a Sky Sports game through and through. The presence of Kirsty Gallagher, the channel's long-term sports news desk presenter, certainly helps proceedings, though like Chris Tarrant it's largely just in the form of a ghostly quizzical voice as opposed to filling the screen with her glamourpuss Scottish face. She does appear on the title screen and the back of the box, like a sexy siren whispering sweet nothings about Ian Dowie or Plymouth Argyle in order to get the enamoured gentleman in the shop to shipwreck his wallet upon the stone of the HMV sales counter. THQ and Sky worked together to bring this title to our PlayStations, and they wisely hired Who Wants to Be a Millionaire developer Alums Hot House Productions to put this together, and I think they made a damn fine go of it. I mean, if your knowledge of football is that Wayne Rooney played for England or Posh Spice married David Beckham, or that the World Cup keeps shifting EastEnders out of its usual time slot, then this is not the game for you. Indeed, if your football knowledge is decidedly Gen Z with your Mbappes, your Haalands and your Vinicius Juniors, then again, this isn't going to be much use to you either. This is very much pre-Ronaldo, this is pre-Messi, and those guys are close to retirement now. So your average soccer crazy kid or teen, or even a guy in their 20s, they're going to struggle here. It's 30-year-olds and up for this game. Trust me on this. I mean, I remember playing St and Greavesy on the Spectrum in 2019 and hating it because I didn't have any boomer football knowledge. But this game, it hit a particular sweet spot for me. I started getting into football in the mid-1990s and probably fell out of love with it in the sort of mid to late 2000s. I still follow England now, but I'm not really into the Premier League as such. Not because it's a worse sport than it was 20 years ago. I just ran out of time to get interested in it. It's on all the time, isn't it? Football this, football that. The international games are just enough for me, which I know is the reverse of how many other people feel. But yes, this is a game of my era. It features Henry, it features Shearer, it features Van Nistelrooy, and the names of those sort of lame foreigners from the time, like Oleg Luzhny and Juan Pablo Angel. And it's not particularly an attractive game to look at. It's not particularly deep. It doesn't even have many questions. But I became utterly charmed with it due to my memberberry juice squirting into my skull. And as soon as I fired it up, I loved it. Even though it's objectively terrible, it does some clever things. The main two modes, although multiplayer is available, are the League mode and the Dream Team mode. Now, the League mode lets you select your club, and depending on which team you are, it'll sort of badger you if you're not doing well enough. So if you play as a Manchester United or a Chelsea or an Arsenal, you'll be expected to be at the top of the table come the end of the season. Whereas if you're a Bradford or a Sheffield Wednesday, you can just sort of lounge in mid-table and be admired by your chairman as if you're some sort of temptress with the calves of Jack Grealish or something. It is a premise that football fans will easily understand. You have 38 fixtures, just like the Premier League, and you'll answer 2 questions, 1 in each half. Get 2 wrong and you'll lose the game. Get 1 wrong and you'll draw, and get 2 right and you'll win. Although form and home fixtures play a part, so you could lose or draw with 1 correct answer. That mode would probably be enough to cheer me up on its own. But the best part of the game is actually the Dream Team mode. You're presented with 11 rounds laid out on the pitch in the 4-4-2 formation, just how proper English football is played by the likes of Sam Allardyce and Roy Hodgson and Alan Pardew and all those sort of English football managers. You play each round and you'll be required to answer a clutch of questions. The quicker you answer with a correct answer, the more cash is thrown at you. Get it wrong and you'll get a yellow card. Get another one wrong and you'll miss a question, thanks to you being a naughty boy and getting a red card. You can leave a question, but you won't get any money at all. And you need that money to buy players, you see. And the round you're answering on the pitch is the one position that you're buying for. So, depending on how well you've done, You might only be able to afford Titus Bramble as a centre-back instead of someone good like Rio Ferdinand or Sol Campbell. Will you end up with Peggy R. Fixad or Peter Schmeichel in goal? Or will you save some money up for a decent player in the middle of the pitch and maybe not get the best striker available? Will you go for someone decent but not amazing like Dion Dublin or Paulo Wanshop, so you can splash on a superstar like Ginola, Beckham or Vieira? It's this level of nostalgia and the strategy involved with assembling your team that puts it beyond a lot of other quiz games. And plus, again, for me, the nostalgia of seeing all these names, and even the ones that are very cheap, will raise a smile to my face. This mode is absolutely awesome. If you're into this kind of thing, I cannot stress this strongly enough. If you weren't into football in the early 2000s, this will have absolutely no appeal at all. I would say that I tried out the multiplayer games, but I didn't. Unfortunately, none of my friends will understand the ridiculous glee of seeing the names of Laurent Robert, Abel Xavier and Gazetta Mendieta. I'm sure if you can get a lot of turn of the century football fans together, you'll have a hoot, but that will be a tough task. Like I've repeated throughout this review, this is a terrible game, an empty, short-lived cash-in on a brief fad for quiz games that happened on the PlayStation towards its dying days. But I absolutely love it as well. There's not even footage from the football games of the era despite the Sky license. And yes, while I understand that space on CDs is very small, you could have put a blurry compressed video or 30 on there. It's not like the rest of the game is going to take a lot of space up. Kirsty Gallagher talking isn't going to fill the CD to its brim. It is just still pictures, text and the odd audio sample, and it still put a dumb smile on my face. It's vapid, it's empty, there's nothing to look at that's particularly interesting. It's dull, and yet it's one of the most fun games I've played this year, and could only be topped if someone finds a hitherto unseen PlayStation 2 video game where you simulate the role of Natalie Portman's underpants. It's a game for me almost exclusively. I understand that. And tomorrow I'm going to treat myself and play the sequel, because yes, it got a sequel. But don't worry, I'm not going to review that. I simply can't be that objective about it. It's going to be crap, and I... So as the World Cup of human rights violations draws to a close and Father Christmas elbows it right in the face in order to score a top corner screamer, we finally close my own month-long exploration of the world's most popular sport with an actual football game, something I've yet to do in this month. Can you believe that? And what a game to finish on. A really high-quality endorsement indeed. Why, of course, it's former Stoke City, Brentford and Swindon Town tough tackling midfielder Chris Kamara, who's on the box. Chris is a fairly well-known figure these days, a cheeky, cheery, clumsy figure who's transcended soccer to become a reliably entertaining and personable character in other televisual pursuits, like comedies such as Ted Lasso and Murder in Successville, and agility game show Ninja Warrior. At the time of the game's publication, though, he was a retired, moderately decent journeyman playing for Division 1 and 2 clubs, with no major trophies to his name and only a brief flirtation with international football via Sierra Leone in the twilight of his career. They attempted to call him up for the 1994 African Cup of Nations, as his father had come from that part of the world, but Chris turned them down. After he retired, Chris took the managerial reins of former clubs Stoke and Bradford briefly, and then moved to football punditry and match reporting with Sky in the closing years of the 90s, a position that he held for 24 years. After that lengthy stint, Chris decided to hang up his microphone with Sky in 2022, but I doubt we've seen the last of him despite his struggles with speech dyspraxia, as he's a charming and charismatic individual and his appeal should see him on our television screens for a wee while yet. Maybe he will release another Christmas album. Can I then count this as the Christmas special now? I don't really fancy doing one this year. No, probably not. So yes, Chris signed up to endorse this soccer effort towards the start of his broadcasting career. It makes it a strange acquisition for publishing house Midas Games. Yes, they were a budget software house putting this title into the £10 game value series, meaning they weren't likely to be chasing the likes of Thierry Henry or Ronaldinho for their signature. But surely someone like, I don't know, Gary Neville or Danny Meals or Craig Bellamy might be an option. Someone not crap, but not a regular Sun headline stealer on the back pages. With that said, Kamara was a regular on the most popular football television shows and not affiliated to any major club, perhaps staving off the tribalistic nature of football fans. You wouldn't sell Alan Shearer's street soccer in Sunderland, for instance, nor Roy Keane's street soccer in Leeds, Liverpool or the blue half of Manchester. Maybe they were being smart, or maybe Chris simply didn't give a shit, unlike the discerning rank and file of turn-of-the-century Premier League British footballers. Yet here we are, with Chris Kamara's street soccer, of all things. As I've already pointed out, Chris Kamara's soccer was a budget pocket money priced game in the later years of the PlayStation 1. The later years of the PlayStation 1 saw the market flooded with budget titles, with varying results, usually terrible. Midas were one of the main players in this field, and why not? Lots of children owned the console at this stage, and they didn't have a lot of cash. It seemed like a money spinner. Pixel Storm studios were bought into program, and they had form for middling quality PlayStation 1 football games, given that they were behind the rather sponsorship heavy name of Puma Street Soccer in association with Pringles. In retrospect, I completely forgive you, Midas, for the title Chris Kamara's Street Soccer. So does Mr. Kamara play a role as a commentator, as a John Madden-esque strategy advisor, or as a star player with an iron will and a tough tackle? The answer? None of these. Maybe this shadowy figure standing manfully next to this vividly red sky of what I can only assume is a soccer-mad post-apocalyptic landscape is this Chris Kamara. Maybe it is. I can't see the Lionel Richie haircut though. I'm just going to assume that for all intents and purposes it's just a photo of him on the case and his name on the title screen in terms of his level of participation in it. Not even a photo on the loading screen. Good grief. Mind you, it's not only Chris Kamara who is absent from proceedings. The street part of the title is notable by its absence too. You can play in castles, temples and Easter Island if you want, but not in any actual streets. You can even play at a Colosseum, but it's spelled like that, and that's likely to put you off your game, isn't it? I'd be thinking about that spelling of Colosseum and going, actually, I don't want to be playing in a Colosseum that can't spell Colosseum correctly. It worries me. It worries me. Bad spelling is only the beginning of the academic failures of this title. You can hail from Prague with that flag, but that certainly wouldn't be Norway. You'll have to make your mind up or omit your crap at geography. Will you score in the first half or the two half? The two half! The street soccer you participate in is of a five-a-side nature, and your city types will be wearing civvy clothes rather than football kits as you bid for glory in League, Cup and exhibitions, and of course the penalty mode. Brave playing football in a gilet in a desert though, isn't it? Brave or stupid? There's some wild differences in height between some of the players, but they are the best players of the street soccer of that city, so who are we to argue? It is odd that certain cities, particularly Rio in Brazil, are represented entirely by attractive women with huge breasts. Well, I mean attractive by PS1 standards. Mind you, the men are thumb-headed goons too, so ain't no one going to be looking for nude cheeks for Chris Kamara Street Soccer in 2022, let me tell you that. Audio is made up of that 2000 era Euro electro tunage that was ubiquitous in low quality late era PlayStation 1 games. And a guy in the office provides glib phrase commentary seemingly from a different room while speaking in a microphone inside of a violated vole. Gameplay is not that of a great football game's gameplay. Player AI is low, meaning you'll struggle to get teammates to make runs. Goalkeepers are intermittently Gordon Banks and Massimo Taibbi in equal measures. Defensive work is very hard because sometimes the computer opponent will just keep leaping over any and all attempts to stop him and just score if they fancy it. It's tough, it's frustrating, and it's low on dribbling skills also. There are a variety of super moves, mostly the result of holding down the shot power button, but that goalie can usually stop all but the most elaborate soccer moves, including one where a player seems to throw it into the goal. So that is very much one of the key rules of the game you're breaking there, probably the key law. Chris Kamara Street Soccer is an attempt to make an NBA Jam style soccer game without any of that game's charm, but it would eventually lead to a far better attempt with the short-lived but fondly remembered FIFA Street series. At least the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, Ronaldinho and Messi would turn up for the FIFA Street efforts. Come on, Chris, otherwise you'll get Delia upset. No reviews exist, so let's have some thoughts of some animals instead. Yes, it's a budget game, but it's not a very good one. When you've got on the PlayStation games like FIFA Road to the World Cup 98 and ISS 98, why would you be playing Chris Kamara Street Soccer? The answer is, you probably shouldn't. Sorry, Chris. Oh, here, pet. Have you got match fishing on Commodore 64?
Don't have it.
It's proper old, like.
Now bog off.
You got that match fishing, Guillaume?
What's that?
This is a bookshop. I'm holding books. Piss off.
No. Oh, don't worry yourself about it, Da. I'm sure you'll find it in Yellow Pages, like. Oh, wait, you got it, lass. I'm proper made up, like. Oh, yes. Me name. It's Joseph Fritzl. Yes, that one. I like Jack Charlton games, and I've got a Geordie accent now. Fishing. Nothing beats whipping out your long, slender rod, flipping it vigorously over a dense thicket into a wet expanse, maggot wriggling until purchase is found. Then, that's followed by the glory of pulling out and seeing the results of your efforts. It is a calming pursuit indeed, and there's no man you'd want to show you his technique with his tackle more than Bob Nudd. Unfortunately, Bob Nudd was not available, so you could do a lot worse than seeking the counsel of footballing legend Jack Charlton. Jack Charlton, actually born as John Charlton in 1935, came from a rich footballing lineage. Not only was his brother one of the all-time England and Manchester United greats, as in Bobby Charlton, but his uncles were from the Milburn family, who included England striker War Jackie Milburn as one of their number. Jack Charlton played his entire football career as a defender for Leeds United, which must have led to some interesting Christmas dinner arguments with brother Bobby, seeing as their two clubs were famously Pan-Pennine rivals. Both brothers had a great deal of success with their respective clubs. winning leagues and cups aplenty, but no greater achievement would be accomplished than that day on the 30th of July in 1966, when England, with the Charlton brothers in their number, triumphed over West Germany to win the Jules Rimet trophy. That's the World Cup to us, young'uns. After hanging up his boots, Jack went into management, first with Middlesbrough to great success, then Sheffield Wednesday for a bit less, and then to the team he supported as a boy, Newcastle, for even less success than he had with Sheffield Wednesday. His most famous stint as a boss was manager of the Republic of Ireland, who he managed from 1986 until 1996, taking them to World Cups in 1990 and 1994, along with the European Championships in 1988. This was an unprecedented level of success for the Irish team, and was partly achieved by, yes, finding Emerald Isle family links with several English-born First Division players. Such was his reverence in Ireland that there is a statue of him in Cork, representing him holding a salmon in his full fishing gear, because yes, as well as his career as a world-class defender and a successful football manager, Jack also enjoyed his fishing. He was a keen angler of an amateur nature who co-penned books and presented television shows such as Go Fishing with Jack Charlton and The Salmon Run with Jack Charlton. That's his name. It is this part of his life that Sheffield-based Alligator Software made a computer game about in 1985 for the ZX Spectrum, the Commodore 64 and the Orao. The what? The Orao is a Croatian computer used in their primary schools. Maybe Davor Suker might have touched one. Maybe, I don't know. I'm only going to cover the Commodore 64 and Spectrum versions, so sorry about that, Orao. Fishing game fans, I guess. Do they even exist? Up to 8 players can discover their joy of a muddy riverbank. So go on, treat yourself next weekend. Ask 7 mates if they want to pop over to play a near 40-year-old fishing game on a Croatian primary school computer. Go on, I'm sure they'll be up for it. I'll come, I won't. You'll pick one of 8 spots around a picturesque lake, which all have different conditions, and fish in the different areas of that lake. This is where the key part of the game is, and no doubt where Jack Charlton felt it was worthy of his good name, apart from that paycheck from Alligator Software. You must use the information supplied by the game to pick your equipment, the bait type, and how far to cast your rod into the good old H2O. If you want to catch the big fish, you better have your angling knowledge in good order. So I struggled. You've got the choice of 3 rods, the choice of a fixed spool or a centre pin, 9 types of bait, different hook sizes, and control of the length of your cast. Does this mean a lot to you at all? Then you'll probably enjoy this game. Some of it is logical. You're not going to cast the line short if your part of the bank is covered with reeds, are you? That wouldn't be smart. But you'll have to know which type of fish likes which type of bait, that kind of thing. From here, you'll be planted at the riverbank, and depending on the length of your game, you'll just have to sit and wait. You can set it as short as a 1-minute game, or you can set it for about an hour. Jack Charlton loved his realism, and if you have to wait 30 minutes for a single bite, well, then that's fishing for you, son. Get used to this serene lakeside backdrop. It's like a Bob Ross painting, isn't it? I mean, if someone took away his phthalo blue and his dark sienna and replaced it with Spectrum cyan or Commodore arse candle brown, then it looks like a Bob Ross painting for sure. At some point, as your soul ebbs away due to how relaxed stroke bored you are, your number will flash and you'll sit bolt upright in your chair like you've had a tug on your line at the local riverbank. Slap that keyboard about the correct key and let's see if you can catch that fish. Have you made the right selections in your tactics? You'll know by the size of your tiddler. To catch the fish in this scene, you have to press space at the exact correct time. But if your line is too slack or you're too late, well, the fish will escape and laugh about your feeble efforts to his beguiled mates on the riverbed. Well, Mr. Perch, I can reread the description at any point of the area of the lake I'm in and replan my aquatic kidnapping assault strategy accordingly. You scale-wearing, limbless turd. I'll have my revenge. Either that or switch the game off and do something else. If you play Jack Charlton's match fishing, you're in for a genteel time indeed. And if you like a sedate Sunday fingering the flank of a bream, then I think you should indulge your primal hunter instincts and go outside and do that. But if it's raining and you're in the possession of a Spectrum, a Commodore 64, or an Orao, whatever it's called, which you won't be, and you've got a copy of this, then please sit down and enjoy Jack Charlton's match fishing. Or if you're like me and you played this on an emulator, then there's always the option of any other game in most game and console libraries from the last 30 years. Probably go and do that. That's probably my advice. Zap64 gave it the once-over in August 1985. They said it was quite a successful implementation of the sport. Not an easy one to translate to the computer, but here they've done it with reasonable elegance. They gave it a 70%. Commodore User said in their July 1985 issue that this is not one for the fast action freaks, and they're not sure that the shrewdest tactics actually make a lot of difference to the game. And they gave it a 60%. Your Spectrum weren't very keen at all on Jack Charlton's fishing efforts in their August 1985 issue. They said that match fishing is probably the most boring game in the world. Tackle this one if you dare, and this gave it a 27% score. Ouch! A 3-star review also came from Sinclair User in their summer of 1985. They said that dedicated anglers may enjoy the game greatly, but they're more likely to enjoy their spare time with the midges, stinky maggots and dead swans, with the crate of Newcastle Brown Ale close by. And that's probably true. Well, there you go. There's a smattering of strange football-related titles. What a curious bunch they were. So thank you for watching all of that. And if you can think of any more, have a look at my channel first. I might have already covered them. But let me know, and I might cover them in the future. Okay, thanks, bye.